Okay, so now we're going to finish up the 9C notes. We're going to finish up example 2. I might talk about the U try nows a little bit. Okay, so write a quadratic equation that would produce the given solutions. So these can be a little tricky because what you're doing is you're actually given the solutions now. And you need to work backwards to write a quadratic equation that would give you those solutions after you factor and solve. Okay, so if we're going to work backwards, what that means is we need to figure out what each of our factors is. So if x equals 3, then if I subtracted 3 from both sides, I would get x minus 3 equals 0. That's what we want to do, is we want to figure out what was the factor that we said equal to 0. X minus 3 equals 0. That would give us x equals 3. And if x equals negative 2, then that factor would have been x plus 2 equals 0. Taking it back another step, we're going to have these two factors being multiplied together to equal 0. Okay, you see how all we're doing is working backwards. Then we just need to multiply these together. So we have x squared plus 2x minus 3x minus 6 equals 0. So we'll have x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. That is a quadratic equation that when I factor it, solve by factoring, I would get x equals 3 and x equals negative 2. Okay. B, we have x equals a fraction, so this can be a little trickier. Okay, so we have x equals 1/2. So I don't want to just subtract the fraction from both sides because that's not how factoring is going to work. We're not going to have x plus a fraction as a factor. But what I can do is I can multiply both sides by the denominator. Multiply both sides by 2. So then I get 2x equals 1. And then to get it equal to 0, I just need to subtract 1 from both sides. So I have 2x minus 1 equals 0. Notice that factor, if we set it equal to 0 and solve for it, we would get x equals 1/2. X equals 3. That one is a little bit easier. We just have to subtract 3 from both sides. We have x minus 3 equals 0. So now I just take both of my factors. I multiply them together. That's going to have to equal 0. So then if I multiply together, I'm going to get 2x squared minus 6x minus x plus 3 equals 0. Combine like terms, I'll get 2x squared minus 7x plus 3 equals 0. And that is a possible quadratic equation that would give me x equals 1/2 and x equals 3 as my two solutions. Okay, so there will be a couple problems like that on your homework. There are some down in the U try now. All right, so some of them are going to pop up on a Schoology quiz, like I said in the previous video. All right, let's talk. I want to do number one, real quick, because this goes back to the hint that I gave up here, which said to in this first step that quadratic must be set equal to 0. And you have to make sure your a value is positive. It just makes your life a little bit easier when you're trying to solve these. So we have y squareds on both sides of the equation in this U try now number 1. So the way a is going to remain positive is if I move everything from the left-hand side over to the right-hand side, because we need to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract y squared. I'm going to subtract 9y, and I'm going to add 15. So that's going to give me 0 on the left-hand side, and the right-hand side is going to be y squared minus 13y plus 42. Okay? Now, it might benefit. Usually I like to have the equal 0 on the right-hand side, so I'm just going to flip things. I'm just going to have y squared minus 13y plus 42. I'm going to have that on the left. I'm going to have the equal 0 on the right. And then from there, you can factor this. Okay? So we have y. Got to remember that this is still an equation, so equals 0. Okay? Now we're looking for two numbers that multiply to give me 42. We have a couple options here. We got 1 and 42, 2 and 21, 3 and 14. 4 doesn't go into it, 5 doesn't go into it, and 6 and 7. So hopefully we're getting a little faster with our factoring. We'll see that it's y minus 6 and y minus 7 because our inners and our outers need to add to give me negative 13y. So negative 6y minus 7y is going to give me negative 13y. Running out of room a little bit, but from here, we split off and we set each factor equal to 0. And we do that, y equals 6 and y equals 7. Okay, so just another example for you on how to keep that a value positive so that you don't have to factor out a negative 1. Okay, got to set your equation equal to 0. You got to keep it equal to 0. You got to keep it in equation, factor it, set each factor equal to 0 and solve. Okay, so there's one of your U-try nows. A couple are going to pop up on a Schoology quiz. Others going to be on your homework. So make sure you practice this because this skill is super important, ladies and gentlemen. All right, if you have any questions, email me. I'm available for video conferencing during this time as well. As always, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying safe. Let me know if you got any questions.